Welcome to the Wealthy Speaker Podcast, the show that offers you tips and strategies to help speakers build the business of their dreams. Now here's your host, 30-year industry veteran and business coach, Jane Atkinson.
Well, welcome everyone to the Wealthy Speaker Podcast. I'm your host, Jane Atkinson, and I'm excited to have a special guest with me today, Kevin Rempel. Welcome to the show, Kevin.
What's up, Jane?
I'm super excited to have you. Full disclosure to our listeners, I know your story because you've been coaching with me for a couple of years now, but tell everybody kind of way back at the beginning how you actually got into the speaking business.
Yeah, the super cool notes, because I know every keynote speaker could talk for a while and go into their story. Yeah. I'm recognized as a Paralympian in sledge hockey. If you saw me walking, I got both legs. Question is what happened? And when I was 23, I'm 42 today. And when I was 23, I was paralyzed in a motocross accident. Never supposed to walk, back on my feet, walking again, high level. But what really put me on stage, the irony is not only was I paralyzed in a motocross accident, my dad was also paralyzed in a hunting accident. At the age of 50, 8 months from retirement, I had a chance to get better, like physically recover with the spinal cord injury. Dad severed his spinal cord, so he had no chance of walking again. Yeah. Unfortunately, it took his life 5 years later. And when I was at family counseling, I got asked to share my story for Spinal Cord Injury Ontario, just a 5-minute talk. And they said, that was great. Would you do it again? And I was like, okay. And they're like, 45 minutes. And I'm like, okay. And I figured it out. And then people said, that was great. Would you do it again? And 16 years later, this has turned into my full-time career.
And we're going to talk today about different kind of flashpoints in your career and how you leveled up. But I actually want to go a little bit back, because if I'm a listener, I'm thinking, okay, tell me a little bit more about the accident. And I think it's not uncommon for people who have had some sort of tragedy and devastation in their life to kind of like gloss over it and just get on to the good stuff, right? So talk a little bit about, I've seen this accident. We'll we'll put your reel out on YouTube so that people can kind of see a little bit of the story with a grandson who does the same type of dirt biking. It scares the bejesus out of me. So talk a little bit about you land yourself in the hospital and what was the diagnosis?
Yeah, so I was categorized as an incomplete paraplegic.
Okay.
So again, the nuance is incomplete versus complete. Incomplete means you've damaged your spinal cord. Complete means you severed it.
Okay.
That's a simple way to understand it.
Okay. And so you're there, and it takes you what type of effort to get back?
Because there's so many different ways I love sharing the story. The simple way to put it into context, 2 weeks in the hospital, then I moved to the rehab center. While I'm there, I meet my therapist, Chris, and ask, how am I going to walk again? He said, wiggle your toes. And I'm like, well, yeah, I know, Chris, but I can't. He said, doesn't matter, just try. You don't know if you don't try.
Right.
Every night, every morning, 10 minutes, just try to wiggle your toes. And I did that. Finally, after about 6 weeks, I got my first toe, just a flicker.
Wow.
But when I saw that, I said to myself, if I can get one toe to move, I bet you I can get one more toe to move.
Mm-hmm.
And my mindset was like, game on.
Game on. And really, mindset is a big part of this journey, is it not?
That's the core of what I love to speak about, is mindset. I love helping people shift their mindsets to navigate career and life transitions to embrace change.
Yeah. And your own mindset absolutely absolutely had to shift. What popped you out of, like, were you angry at all when you first got injured? Like, what were some of the emotions that you had to get to, I'm gonna do this?
Yeah. So again, for context again, and yes, I would love to share with you some of the, like the not so pretty moments, because one of the things that I've learned as a keynote speaker, I've made the mistake, and this is just growth in the journey in your career as a speaker.
Yeah.
I went from like one side of the pendulum where I was like all raw emotion, really heavy talk,
Yeah.
to trying to like not make it heavy, to polished keynote and like skimmed over all of the hard stuff and only talked about
Right.
the good.
The
And then I
pendulum
had to like swing him back to the
far.
middle.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So I'm trying to remember, what was your question, Jane?
Question was, this is so funny because I don't have a great memory either. The question was, what were some of the emotions, like what were some of the stages that you had to get to in order to
Oh, I
then
remember.
first toe move?
Yes. So two things that are important I want to share. Number one, the irony of my journey is that my dad was injured first.
Yeah,
And so I spent 4 years as a member, as a family member, as a caregiver,
caregiver.
seeing someone navigate their disability,
Yeah,
their spinal cord injury.
yeah,
Fortunately, unfortunately, depending on how you look at it, my dad taught me a lot about how I did not want to be.
yeah. He showed you how to just wallow in it, right?
Yeah, that this like, and not trying to shit on my dad or nothing, but like he took on a victim mindset. Poor me, can't believe it happened. Why is this happening? My life's over kind of deal.
Yeah.
And it drove family and friends away. And so I just thought in my mind, I'm like, I already know what that path looks like.
Yes.
So I'm just gonna do the opposite, because it's got to be better than this.
Yeah. So what's the opposite?
And so simple examples. And so part two, and what ties into this, I want to acknowledge for all the viewers, listeners, I had the days where I pulled my bed sheets over my eyes, crying myself to sleep.
Yeah.
Um, Even though you see me walking today, by no means am I quote unquote okay. I live with an invisible disability, chronic pain, chronic fatigue, pins and needles in my legs 24/7 all day, every day, muscle spasms, muscle atrophy, and my bowel and bladder is screwed up for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
Um, I had days where I wanted to give up, wondered why it was happening. Like I've been, after my dad took his life, I've been suicidal, and I share my keynotes on stage on purpose to let people know I'm human. I've called the suicide hotline 3 times in my life when I was in my 20s going through stuff, and every single time it was because of a girl, like a breakup, and I was heartbroken. Like
Yeah.
I'm not Superman.
Yes. Yes.
But if people are curious, what did you do in these moments? How did you get from one toe to walking, etc.? It literally was as basic as you could imagine. I didn't even know what it was that I was doing at the time. I was just doing it because it worked. But I got a journal, and I started journaling my thoughts to get the crap out of my head. And I would also practice gratitude. So when I'm out, recapping my day in rehab, journaling, I'm so grateful that I got to like I can push myself, because there's people in this facility that are quadriplegics that have no use of their hands or their arms.
Right.
I'm grateful that I could still get outside in the sun today. I'm not bedridden. I'm grateful that I have the dexterity in my hand to hold a fork to feed myself. And I remember vividly that when I was outside reading a book, I was reading Christopher Reeve's book, Nothing is Impossible. And I remember thinking, I'm so grateful, dexterity again, that I have the dexterity in my fingers to turn the page of the book that I get to read outside in the sun.
We have listeners who are going through some shit. They're going through it right now, Kevin. And what you just shared I know I had to dig it out of you. Guess it's not what you want to talk about.
That's cool.
What you just shared is going to help somebody. Journal and gratitude. Journal and gratitude. This is why we do this podcast, is not only to help people grow their businesses, but to give people perspective.
And
yes.
hope.
Yes, and hope. Yes, I'm having a bad day. Yes, something terrible has happened in my life. I've lost something. I'm going through a flood in my home. I have like 20 friends who are dealing with the fallout of a hurricane right now. And I just want to say thank you for sharing that, because I just think it's really, really, really important. So thank you. Props,
You're welcome.
flowers,
Yeah.
flowers to you for that. Okay, so you're going along in your life and in your business, and you get asked to speak. In the early days, you talked about your speech being kind of way over, maybe perhaps a little too dark, a little too emotional. And then the pendulum swung too far to the other side, polished. And then you kind of landed in the middle. You had this really big presentation that was coming up when we were working together this past year, and 1,200 people was going to be your largest audience yet. Am I right on that?
Correct. Yep.
You said, okay, I am going to up my game. And so I kind of watched you all through this. We talked about what you were going to do and planned it, and talk about what you did in order to take it to the next level. So let's first chunk it down to, what did you do with the speech itself?
Yeah, a couple things. Number one, I really reviewed the order of how I told my story.
Mm-hmm.
And in the end, I actually didn't change it too much, but for a simple, how I tell my story is I speak about my motocross journey and my accident first.
Mm-hmm.
And then I actually don't tell my story in chronological order. I tell my accident first. People are like, oh shit, wow, that's wild. And then I bring in my dad as like a right hook.
Mm.
At the time, I was questioning if that was
The right thing.
the way I would continue and if I wanted to level up. I tried through coaching and practice, telling my story in chronological order. I even offered my keynote for free to past clients with this new version, tested it, and it actually did not land as well.
Okay.
So I took that feedback and then I leaned in further to, let's keep the order the same, but figure out what are the nuances about whether it's a punchline or adding in humor, which is something I did, or the visuals, which we can talk about, because I completely redesigned every single slide.
Yes.
And that was like the first major area I reviewed to see if that was what I wanted to continue, because yeah, I'll just end it at that.
Really good. So here you are, a paid professional speaker, speaking for lots of money, a lot of money. And you said to how many people, I've got a new presentation. Can I test it on your audience for free? Tell us a little bit about that, because not a lot of people are taking a step back. And, most people would have done that in a paid situation. And I really liked what you did. How many clients did you offer it to, and how many did you end up playing?
Yeah. Can I share my keynote fee just for context for people? It's not like,
yes, absolutely.
I, just like every other speaker, climbed the ranks, let's say, I'm 16 years into my career. I started at 500. I started for free. Then I started at $500. Today I'm $9,500, but I hit all the tiers, like 1,500, 25, 35, 45, 5, 6, 75, 9, whatever. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So yes, I went to past clients. I think if I came up with 10. My goal was 5, because I knew that not everybody would say yes or have the availability in their schedule.
Sure.
So goal was 10. I think I landed with 4 people that took me up on the offer.
Yes.
And there was like, yeah, availability was one of the issues. Anyways, it was well worth it. In fact, that's one of the biggest lessons learned. I learned too late in my career to be true, that I wish in hindsight earlier in my career, I had the humility. I wish I had the humility to go do more for free, to get the reps in, and to polish the keynote. And then that would lead into my second thing, which maybe I'm jumping ahead in the story.
That's okay.
But here I am in my 16th year, and I finally feel like I've truly learned the lesson that the best thing you can do to get hired or paid as a keynote speaker is to just have a solid speech. Like
Yes.
I spend too many years, and I'm cool to admit, embarrassingly, I spent too many years putting too much effort or more effort into marketing myself rather
Yes.
than on the speech itself. And the
Yeah.
best thing you can do is just rock the fucking, pardon me, I'm swearing, rock the stage. And then the word of mouth and everything does the marketing for you. But I had it reverse order for too long. So I took the CPHR was the catalyst or the tipping point, I guess you would say. For this year, I decided for me to level up, I got to stop with lean in differently to what's going to book more events, but also rock the houses, which is make the keynote great. And that's where things started to really shift for me this year.
You know, we've always said the best form of marketing is a great presentation. And so number one, you got to work on that. You leveled it up and you practiced it with some clients, or you rehearsed it, 4 times for free. Did you do it for free?
Yeah,
That
for
was
free.
amazing. What an amazing thing to do mid-career. Then you also leveled up your slides. So the visual impact is now, do you want to put in a plug for your designer? I don't know if they're taking on more clients or not, but you were like madly in love with this design.
Yeah. Her name is Ashley King. And coincidentally, a videographer I work with, they're friends. And she spent a few years in corporate designing polished presentations for corporate people, and now does this as freelance. And I got to give a massive shout out to Sean Kanungo, because Sean's my inspiration to want to level up my slides and my keynote game. And long story short, Sean does a lot with like video imagery,
Yes.
but I settled on upping my PowerPoint slides, and I was blown away about what you can do in PowerPoint with a professional editor.
Yes.
So yeah, shout out to Ashley King. Please DM me at Kevin Rempel on Instagram if you want me to connect you to. But again, for context, this was the first, so here I am 16 years in my career, and the first time ever, not only did I have my biggest audience to date, my biggest physical sized stage to date, and the first time ever that I got to speak with a presentation screen behind me that was a 3:1 ratio, not the 4:6 ratio.
Right.
And that's what made me want to both lean into reaching out to Sean to just have a quick chat, get some ideas, but invest the time, because I'm like, if I'm on a 3:1 screen, and this, look, whether you are or not a speaker on a 3:1 screen, choosing to invest into your keynote is always going to be a great decision.
Yes.
You don't need to wait for this or a certain size audience to do so.
Right. Yes. And by the way, Monica, can you put a link to Sean's podcast with me in the show notes? Because I think that could be helpful for people. He does some amazing things. So we want to put in a plug for Sean. And we'll also put in a link to get in touch with you to do.
Yeah, we can put Ashley's contact details in the show notes if you
put
want
Ashley
to.
on as well. Yes. Thank you for that. Okay. So you learn that the screen is going to be different. So you level up your slides in that regard. But then there's a third thing, and you've leveled up your presentation. There's a third thing that you do. Had you used Talkadot before this presentation?
No, that was the first time I used it.
Okay.
If I remember, I tested it in the free events, and then CPHR was the first time I used it on a live keynote.
We'll put a link to the Talkadot. we had Arel, who is the founder of Talkadot, on the podcast recently too. And we'll put in our promotional affiliate link because you get some extras when you sign up through us. So were you skeptical using Talkadot? So tell everybody what it is, and were you skeptical to use it and try it? It was a QR code idea, right?
Yep. It's software that's designed specifically for keynote speakers. I had seen other speakers use it, heard about it for probably 18 months. Yes, I was skeptical.
Yeah.
And yeah, I did. I have been using it since for the last 6 months now. And at that event, yeah, and honestly, I have been quite impressed with it. What I would say, so number one, not audience of 1,200. I think I had roughly, it was about 225 people respond.
Okay.
Then the Talkadot helps you field or filter people based on leads versus just email opt-ins.
Yes.
I ended up with 87 leads, which I forwarded back to the National Speakers Bureau, who had booked me for that engagement.
Okay.
So, like many leads, is to be determined in terms of the time frame when those may convert into an actual paid event.
Yes.
But Talkadot's been fantastic for building my email list and generating leads, just to have an idea, a gauge on who's in the audience and like where their head's at.
And you're making it easy for people. So talk about the event that you wish you would have done it and you didn't. Did you decide not to do it because of a particular reason, or what was that decision?
Yeah, I had another event recently. Audience size was 200 to 250 people in the room. And the honest answer is I just talked myself out of it. I talked myself out of Talkadot. That should be a little punchline for them.
There you go.
Not
yeah.
to do.
Don't talk yourself out of this. Yes. Okay. So you talked yourself out of it and you didn't do it, but what happened?
Yeah. So silly me was like, oh, it's not that big of a deal. Or it's just like, and again, I want other people to hear. Yeah, what I said to myself was, I'm like, oh, this event, they're probably not going to want my download this event, or this event's not going to matter, or, it's a waste of time, or I'm taking up time in the keynote and they're going to want to just help. They're going to want me to just go directly into the close. Like all the silly things that I convinced myself why not to add that one slide.
Yes.
And I did a smashing job. I got my third standing ovation out of 4 recent events. It was phenomenal. And I had so many people after the event say, how can I get in contact with you?
So it just goes to show, even after 16 years, that little gremlin can still be on
the point that I want people to hear.
Talking to you, saying, they're not going to want your download. Tell everybody what you offer, because that's important, an important part too. The idea behind Talkadot is that you put a QR code up and you say, I'd really like to get your feedback on this presentation. And when you walk through the steps, there's only 4 of them. There's going to be a bonus for you at the end. And I'm going to offer you what? What did you offer them that you thought, oh, they're not going to want this?
So in my keynote, when I share my key takeaways, I love including visual models. Simon Bowen is who I was coached by, who inspired me to use visual models. And people may remember the bullet points, but I'm like, hey, if you find these visual models and the animations and stuff like that tricky to remember or to help you save taking notes,
yes,
just know that at the end of my keynote, I'll be sharing with you a resource where you can have all of these visual models with the key takeaways in a beautiful PDF so that you can just, post it on your wall at home, that kind of thing.
Beautiful. And I think that's really valuable. I think offering up your slides is really valuable so that people can kind of be more present with you and not worry about missing things. So it kind of takes them, it says you can pay attention. It's safe to pay attention. So you leveled up in 3 different ways here that we're talking about: speech, slides, call to action, which is talk a dot. What else?
I just want to, yeah, there's one really more nuance, so important that I want to share about what shifted.
Okay.
And I can't remember if I specifically did it as CPHR, but I've done it since. Back to our discussion about talking about the tough days.
Yes.
So yes, it was earlier this year, that I can't remember specifically what it was. Maybe I just talked about it. I talked about the tough days in a keynote and people started commenting more. But, well, two things. Not only do I now intentionally speak more about the difficulty that I used to skim over. I think I mentioned this to you just privately, Jane, prior to this call. I find that I don't think this is the truth. I know this is the truth. I am more humble as a speaker today because I've been humbled, because I wasn't humble. My relationship with God has played a role big time, and my relationship with my girlfriend, Jess, big time. But I'll give you an example about how showing up with a greater level of humility has paid. I don't want to say paid off in the sense of I'm not being more humble to earn more dollars. I know that will be a byproduct, but I'm being more humble because, number one, that's the right thing to do. Number two, because I want to be able to connect more with my audience. And so not only do I share more about the difficulty that I used to skim over. So like I say, leaning into, yes, I've been suicidal. Yes, I pulled the cover over my head with my eyes closed crying. Yes, I had days that I want to give up. That's number one, humanizing me, not Olympic medalist, podium person.
Yes.
But I also make it a very specific point to let people know I did not get here on my own. I got here, like, not only have I been depressed and suicidal, I've worked with a psychologist, a psychiatrist, I've practiced cognitive behavioral therapy. I'm so lucky that I've got a fantastic mother who is there to support me, family and friends who showed up at the rehab center regularly. I'm super lucky that I did have insurance, because there's people that didn't have insurance that get injured.
Yes.
And my teammates and everybody. But if it weren't for those people who provided me with support, I could not have done what I have done. So then I share that in the context of when in a corporate audience, we all have a team supporting us.
Yes.
And it may be big or small. And there's a whole conversation to be had about whether you have the right players on your team, et cetera. But for me as a keynote speaker, again, embarrassingly, I don't beat myself up, but I've been humbled, look back, and I think, wow, there's too many talks I delivered that I did not acknowledge the other people that helped me recover, even get to this stage as a speaker. And I know my speeches and the spin-offs pivoted when I showed up more humble on stage.
That is so important, because number one, it's not about you anyway, right? It's about them. But I love it when somebody who's done something heroic makes other people the heroes of their story. So you're taking it off of you, I did this, and making it all about the team that got you there. And so my marketing mind says, and of course with team, we can go in lots of different places, because nobody gets to be the president of the company without a team around them. And what does that look like in the workplace? So really, really, really good message and important. And I don't think it comes necessarily naturally. That doesn't come easily to me either. I am a narcissist. I think about myself constantly, and it's easy to show up that way on the platform. So my little mantra going on is always about, it's about them, not you anyway. Be humble. I have to remind myself, be humble and be kind, and so on and so forth. So do you have any kind of mantra or anything that you say to yourself before you go on stage?
These days, yes, I've developed a speaking pregame routine. for me, I have like my hype playlist. So I have specific like songs I like to listen to.
Nice.
And transparency, I don't do this every single time,
Mhm.
but especially for the big ones or when I feel like I need it, I have my go-to strategies. So I got my hype playlist, push-ups, squats, something physical to like get the
Yeah.
body feeling like you're moving your blood around. It's
Yes.
going to release the endorphins in your brain, and I absolutely get on the stage better that way.
Yes.
I had another speaker, Sylvia, I can't pronounce her last name.
Degusta?
No, Marslick or something. I'm
Okay.
so sorry, Sylvia, if you're listening to this, that I
Yes.
butchered it. She's a
Apologies.
safety speaker and she's super awesome.
Okay.
She gave me 3 things to write down prior to my keynote. And if I remember, again, I try and remember this correctly, but one is like, it's about intention. So 3 things that I wanted the audience to feel, 3 things about how I want to show up, and like, yeah, like what's my intention for the day.
Oh, I love that.
And I did that a few times before keynotes, and it really, really made a difference for me to
Yes.
think about what is my mindset as I take the stage to help influence their mindset.
Yes. So good. So good. And I love, we're going to help some people today. We're going to help somebody. Somebody in that audience needs to hear this message today. And maybe I'm just here for that one person. That's okay too. Uh, what other mistakes maybe have you made or smart decisions that you've made, just to kind of wrap this up and put a bow on it? Is there anything else that you feel like you really want to share with our listeners?
We covered some of the big stuff for sure. Um, I think we covered like the best stuff that I would want people to know. Like, I mean, where I'm at, not just in my speaking career, but in my life. I'm 42 years old. Like I mentioned, we're not like, I have God back in my life. He was before my dad got hurt. When dad got hurt, I said, peace out.
Mm.
And that's completely shifted my life in a positive way. But the humility, that's been like the number one thing about my keynotes that's different now going forward. And again, I'm not measuring my career success by standing ovations, but obviously if you influence an audience enough and they choose to stand for you, that shows something. I can literally remember almost down to the event, but I remember in 2015, I actually stopped receiving standing ovations. I used to get them all the time early in my career.
Hmm.
And all of a sudden they stopped one day. And I remember thinking, I'm like, oh, that's weird. They didn't stand this time. And fast forward literally 10 years practically, because we're at 2024. And yeah, this summer I just started getting them again.
Huh.
And so
What do
when
you
I
think you
say,
had in 2015 that you brought back in 2024?
so again, pulling back, just being so honest that people can relate, like my ego fucking took off.
Hmm.
So I'm not here to pitch anything. People want it, they can pick up my book I've written, Still Standing. I wrote about it in there about how I was on Team Canada. And I thought after the Paralympics, my speaking career was going to take off. And I didn't want to play hockey anymore. I was pissed off about some things that have happened. So I'm no longer on the team. I decided I'm going to take off to do this speaking thing, entrepreneurial on my own. And I was no longer under the Hockey Canada umbrella. I was no longer under the RBC umbrella, under their RBC Olympians program. So I'm
Right.
just Kevin Rempel now. Well, now all of a sudden, I'm not required to fit an image because I was representing those organizations. And I
Hmm.
want like part of me, but I'm like, I'm gonna be myself.
Yeah.
And if people don't like me, too bad.
Yeah.
So in hindsight now, it's 10 years later, but I can look back, I'm like, because at the time I'm like, I don't know what's going on. But 10 years later, I can look back, I'm like, oh, you fucking idiot. Like your ego skyrocketed and you didn't recognize it, but everybody else recognized that you had one.
Yeah.
And even though you got booked, people aren't resonating or connecting with you. And so they're not standing up.
Yeah.
And as soon as I humbled myself again, like I said, through the nuances this year,
Yeah.
like they're just all of a sudden standing up again. And I'm like, oh shit. I'm like, now I see what
Uh,
happened in 2015. You know what I
uh,
mean?
okay. I want to talk to you just briefly about one more thing because you've sworn a few times on this podcast.
Oh,
And
sorry.
I don't really care. This isn't spit and chicklets, Kevin, but I do want to say I do want to ask you the question, when you speak on a big stage, what do you have to control yourself? Because I know you and I know that this is just kind of how you talk. And I can have a pretty wicked mouth on me too. Tell me about when you're on stage. Do you let any F-bombs drop, or are you really cognizant of trying to hold that back?
I am cognizant on stages with speeches, and
Yes.
maybe could have been more here.
No, that's okay. I'm not asking you to apologize for people who are offended by it. I still hope that they got your message, and this is kind of who you are. You're a hockey player, and this is kind of who you are.
Yeah, yeah. And hockey player aside, this is who I am. Like,
Yeah.
if anything, is motocross. But
Yeah, okay.
but what because I'm positive other people are thinking or wondering about the same thing.
Yeah.
Like, what I have found, I would say, what I have learned from myself is I do make effort to keep my cursing to a minimum if I curse at all. If I do curse on stage, it's, I would say, strategically.
Yeah, like
At
maybe
a point.
once or something like that, just to really bring impact. Yes.
Yeah, like when I hit the ground and crashed and broke my back, I'm like, oh fuck, I'm paralyzed. Like,
Yes.
that's the
And
moment in the
that's
keynote.
literally what you thought. So you're relaying something from that moment. And I don't think that would take audiences and have them be offended. I've seen lots of conversations about this on Facebook with speakers before. So I just wanted you to say, I don't do this on stage, but maybe once when I crash. And that's just so people understand that you're not necessarily promoting that.
Yeah, the big lesson that I learned that I would want other people to think about, this is who I am.
Yes.
And I spent too many years trying to fit a mold about, I was a speaker who showed up in a suit. Sometimes I wore a tie. I went making sure the socks looked good, all the stuff. And what I've learned after all these years, people want the most raw, like most authentic version of you. They're hiring you because you're you.
Yes.
But when you show up to try and look like them, to sound like them, to talk like them, like, I actually, another nuance that's changed this year, I actually have pulled back from how much I tie in corporate examples into my keynote.
Oh, interesting. Say more about that.
It's minimal, but I would give a talk and I'd do all the discovery call to figure out what's your challenges and, client, employee retention and, high perform, And it's like, I would share my story, but then I would just share corporate example, corporate example, corporate example, corporate example. Like, it was like a 1-to-4 ratio instead of like a 2-to-1 ratio.
Okay.
And then people subtly, but made comments. They're like, we just really wanted to hear your story.
Your story. Like, I've hired you because you're you.
Yeah, it's like the words verbatim. This is what people will say. We will draw from your story our own conclusions.
Yeah, I like that. I like that.
And so the best thing that I now do, or one of the things I've learned to do, is tell my story in the right way that is me, it's authentic, it's life, with a couple corporate examples, but as if you do it in the right way, they can connect the dots all day long.
Okay. That's really good. You know what? You have provided some amazing feedback for people. What is your best way? You mentioned Instagram earlier. What is your best way for people to connect with you? Would you like them to get with you on Instagram or where?
Yes, please. Yeah. Everything is my name. So Kevin Rempel, Rempel. Website's kevinrempel.com, at Kevin Rempel on Instagram.
Okay.
Super easy to find. And if people want any tips, I'm happy to just chat speaker life. And of course, if someone's looking for a speaker, that too.
Nice. Well, thank you so much for your time today. I know you made an impact on somebody out there who has having a bad day. And if that's you, please I hope you will pick up the phone and get some help. There are suicide hotlines out there. There are agencies out there who can help you, and there is hope. So thank you, Kevin, for sharing your story. That will inspire other people. And if you've appreciated this, hey, let me know, jane@speakerlauncher.com. I would like to hear your feedback as well. All right. Thank you, Kevin. I appreciate you being with us. And with that, we're going to say, see you soon, wealthy speakers. Bye for now, everyone.
Thanks for listening to the Wealthy Speaker Podcast. If you need help building the speaking business of your dreams, head over to wealthyspeakerschool.com and take advantage of our 20-minute next step call. Thanks for listening to the Wealthy Speaker Podcast.